I was born August 21st, 1966. Whittier, California is my place of birth. My dad is Frank Joseph Verucchi. My mother's Dolores Elaine Verucchi. Okay, the parents on my father's side is Frank Egidio Verucchi and Margaret Elizabeth Verucchi. My mom's parents are Arthur Horace Goodness and Elaine Goodness. Okay, I have one brother, my siblings, okay. One brother, Frank Joseph Verucchi Jr., and then I have four sisters, Cindy, then myself, Diana, Sabrina, and Tammy. When I was growing up, my dad worked for Tontitown Marble Company here in Tontitown on Highway 68, and he did that for a number of years. I can remember him working out there, and he had a sign on his truck, Tontitown Marble. And later in high school, after he had an accident, he started a marble company outside of Tontitown, his own marble company. Well, my dad had cows, so we took care of the cows a lot, and we had chickens. My brother had some pigs. We always had a lot of animals running around, dogs, cat, a duck. Okay, we had a lot of work on the farm. The kids were in charge of a lot. My brother would feed the cows, and he took care of the pigs. My brother Frank had pigs, he did that. But my sisters and I, we would collect eggs. We would also help to feed the calves if they weren't getting enough milk from their mother. My dad would mix up the formula for the cows and put them in these big bottles, and we would go out there and feed the calves. And well, we had to take care of the yard, mow. My brother got the riding lawnmower, and the sisters and I did all the trim work. And when we first moved into the house on Highway 68, my very first job that I can remember is picking up rocks in the fields. We had to clear the fields, so my sisters and my brother and my parents were out there, of course, too, but picking up rocks. So we were always very busy. We lived just on the highway, on Highway 68 in Tontitown. And I loved growing up there. Both sets of grandparents were within a half a mile of us. My grandparents, Goodness, were right next door, and across the field were my Aunt Sally and Uncle Leon, Zupo, and across from them, across the highway, was my grandparents on my dad's side, Margaret and Frank Verucchi. So we were always going back and forth. There wasn't much traffic on the road, so we'd cross the road or we'd run across the field. We had a great time. We spent most of our time probably just playing with one another at the house, whether it was riding bicycles or putting on gymnastics programs, counting cars. I can remember doing that. That just shows how little traffic there was. We'd stand on our front porch if we were bored, and we would count the number of cars that went by or the color of cars that went by. So we came up with interesting things. Oh gosh, there's complete difference. I mean, the highway's been expanded. It was a 2-lane road when I was growing up, and now it's 4-lane plus the turn lane in there, and there's just tons of traffic. When I was growing up, we could walk from my house to the park, Tontitown Park, because we played softball and all, and my parents would let us walk up to there. It's only a little over a mile, so it's not far, but the traffic was not bad. So now, in the marble business, we were not involved. My dad was the manager of it. We weren't involved in that. But now, whenever he started his business, I did work for him for a little while there in the office. And one of my other siblings, Sabrina, worked for him actually pouring and forming the marble. And my mother also helped out in the office. Well, I started working at Venetian Inn whenever I was in junior high. Alice Leatherman asked if I would like to work for her. I wasn't even 16 yet, but I guess it was okay back then. So I went to work for her and worked there for a number of years, cleaning tables. And by the time I finished, I was hostess. Really enjoyed that. Alice was wonderful. She would always feed you. So you got a free meal every time you went to work. And even, it was funny, my husband worked for Alice Leatherman, also at Venetian Inn, but that was before I even knew him. That was after I had left Venetian Inn and he went to work for her. Alice was always telling jokes, always telling jokes. It was busy. We were always very busy, I will say that. Game nights, people would stand for an hour to get into Venetian Inn. And the waitresses were funny. There was Rosalie Sabatini worked there. Elsie Mae Pinalto was working there when I worked. Holly White, just many of my friends that I grew up with. So we worked hard, but we enjoyed it. Let's see, growing up, I think Venetian Inn was the only place I worked until college, and then I worked in retail after college. Now at home, some of the things that we did routine-wise, the girls were always the ones to clean the kitchen. Again, my siblings, we had one boy in the family, Frank, and then there were 5 girls. So it was a 3-bedroom house. My brother had a room to himself, and then there were 5 girls in another room. We had 2 sets of bunk beds and a twin bed in that room. It was so crowded that we had to take off the closet door to be able to fit the twin bed in there so we could get to the closet. And we had 1 chest of drawers, and we each had 1 drawer for ourselves. So we were very tight, but you know, all modesty was out the window at that point with 5 girls in a room. We would help my mom cook dinner. We did mainly the inside stuff. My dad and my brother would work out in the fields with the cows. We would help some. But my very first memory of Tontitown was lining up with my siblings inside my aunt and uncle's house who lived across the field from us, Sally and Leon Supo. Well, I guess we had just gotten into town, and we all went in there, and all the kids were standing in line like this, I guess probably introducing all of us to their kids. And then there must have been a big snowstorm about that time, because I can remember going across the field and it seemed like that snow was way up past my knees, and of course I was only 3 at the time, so it may not have been a big snowstorm, but it seemed like it. So that was probably my earliest memory. But growing up, it was very just no stress. I didn't feel like I had any stress in my life. It was just a lot of fun. I can remember making snowmen out in the field with my brothers and sisters, just playing outside with them. When we got a little bit older, we got some motorcycles, so we would ride motorcycles in our field. And we had 2 big ponds in our field also, and so we would fish down there. I can remember one time my brother caught a big bass. I guess it was a bass. It was a big fish in the pond. It must have been there for years. And we would go camping a lot with some other people from Tontitown on the Illinois River. And we had this bus. It was probably like an old hatchery bus that my dad and my Grandpa Goodness remodeled. I mean, they gutted everything out of it and built bunk beds and the kitchen in there and all, and we would go camping with the Cholas and Brenda and Larry J. Rowe, Clarence and Judy Chola, Joanne and Larry J. Rowe, or Gary J. Rowe. Gary Messino, Larry and Brenda J. Rowe, and Gary and Joanna Messino, and all their kids. We would have a good time. My grandparents, my mother's parents, Arthur and Lillian Goodness, they were French. They were not Italian, but his name was Labonte, but his father wanted them to change their name from Labonte to Goodness so that they would fit in better, so they wouldn't be discriminated against. They came from Canada down into Maine, and then they went to California for a while, and then moved in 1970, I believe it was, to Tontitown, and I called them Meme and Pepe, and Meme worked for all of the priests, and she would clean the rectory for them here in Tontitown, and Pepe kept up the church grounds and did maintenance there and at the school, Tontitown School. When we would go shopping, it seemed like we had to go a long way away. Grocery shopping, my mom would go to Harps in Springdale, and if you were to take that drive now, it probably would take longer because all of the traffic, but you don't really know when you leave Tontitown and get to Springdale. But growing up, I can remember traveling on 68, and you would pass lots of trees and open fields, so it seemed like you were going a long way away to go grocery shopping. And then if my mom was to take us clothes shopping, we would go to Emma Avenue. There's Ryan's store on Emma Avenue, or eventually, I guess when they built the mall, we would go out to the mall to shop. Now, the grocery store, yes, Felix Pose's grocery store right across from the church. My mom worked at Felix's grocery store for quite a while. We would shop over there, yes. Okay, when I was growing up, my siblings and I went to Tontitown Elementary School. The building is still here. And it was great. It was great. Very small. We didn't have a lot of kids in our school, but I liked that because you got to know all of the kids very much. I grew up with Kim Chola. She started first grade with her, and we were best friends all through elementary school. She's still a dear friend. My teachers, I liked them. Mrs. Mabry stands out. She was my she was my second and third grade teacher. And she was a great artist. She drew and painted pictures all over in her classroom. I can remember we had multiplication spelling bees every Friday, and she had this thing up on the wall. It was a big worm, and every student had a section of the worm. And if you made a 100 on your multiplication, you would get a star. She's just a great teacher. And then we had Sister Teresina and Sister Leonella. They were my fourth and fifth grade teachers that I remember a lot and really enjoyed them. I got married in 1992 to Michael Thomas Kidd, and we got married in the old Tontitown church in 1992, and then we moved away for about 20 years. He finished up school, and we moved back in 2010, and we have 3 children: Michael Thomas Kidd Jr. and James Daniel and Mary Margaret, and they go to Springdale schools. Growing up, we had, the kids had a CY program. It's called Catholic Youth Program. And I interchanged school with church, because most of the kids that I went to church with also went to the Tontitown school. But we would do different activities. So one of the things that we did is, after they opened up the basement in the school so they could put classrooms down below, and the students and some of the parents painted the downstairs of the old school, and we would help out with different receptions, things going on in the hall, and we always helped with the Grape Festival, always. The kids would help in the kitchen. Mostly the girls would help in the dining hall on the, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday night, bringing tea or water to the people coming in to eat dinners, putting silverware on. We didn't use plastic silverware back when I was growing up. We used the real stuff, so we would dry it and we would have to fold it in the napkins and put those on the tables. And then some of the boys swamped, what they call swamped, and clear the tables. But I can remember my brother and some of his friends would work in a booth outside selling sodas and all. And my parents, when I was young, I can remember my parents, along with Judy and Clarence Chola, Brenda and Larry J. Rowe, and Wanda and Joe Penalto would work in the hamburger stand. There was a hamburger stand out on the grounds, and they would make hamburgers out there, and those were the best hamburgers I ever had. They were really good, but then they don't have that anymore. My sisters and I loved the rides. My brother, not so much. They would make him sick. We lost him one time for a while at the Grape Festival. We were kind of worried, but we found him. But my sisters and I would go on anything that spun fast, went upside down. We would ride it and then run to the back of the line again and ride it again. We lived out there. It was fun. Oh, and I will have to say this. My younger sister, Diana, won the vehicle one year in high school, which I believe it was even on my birthday that she won that. So I'm still waiting to win. A big thing in Tontitown is the Grape Festival Queen. And 3 girls run from the Tontitown Parish every year selling tickets to see who will be the Grape Festival Queen. So whoever sells the most tickets for the vehicle that's going to be given away at the festival becomes queen. Now, my older sister ran one year. It must have been in 1983. She ran, Cindy did, but she ended up with mono, of course, that summer. So I was put in charge of selling tickets for her. So she didn't win. She didn't win that year. She says I didn't work hard enough, but Judy Taldo won that year. And the year after that, I ran, and I was queen. And the year after that, my sister Diana ran, and she was queen. And then, gosh, let's see, back probably 10 years later, our youngest sister, Tammy, ran for queen, and she was queen also. So we have a little bit of a legacy there. For the crowning of the queen, which happens on the Friday night of the festival, there's always a guest speaker. And so our most famous speaker that I can remember was Bill Clinton. And that was when he was, I believe he was governor one time when he was here, because he was here on more than one occasion. He crowned my sister Diana queen. He was governor, and then another time he was running for governor, and he came. So the year that I was, I guess, giving up my crown, when my sister Diana ran for queen, he brought Hillary and Chelsea with him. So we had dinner with him beforehand, and then he crowned her queen. So Preparing for the Grape Festival, it takes quite a bit of time. So in July, the parishioners start making pasta. So I can remember coming out making pasta, and more so now that I'm older and back. We just finished making pasta, and a lot of pasta, and my daughter Mary Margaret has also gotten her fill of making pasta also. It's very interesting, and it's a lot of fun. My husband makes sauce. That's his job at the festival. Huge vat. You would just not believe how big this vat of sauce is. You have to use canoe oars to stir it. So that's why the women like to have some men there to help stir the sauce because it's tiring. Usually there's a group of men cracking eggs and mixing the flour and the dough, and it's carrying a lot of heavy stuff back there. Leonard Penalto and Ernie Dinas and Jeff Franco were back there just last month doing that, I can remember. And they would make the dough, and after the dough, there's 4 or 5 steps to it. You've got to cut the dough and pound it down and run it through the machine once to make long strips. And then you put flour on that, fold it up, and then you send it to another station. There's 4 or 5 other stations that do this next job, and they run it through a machine 3 different times, I believe, and it brings it down to the thickness that you want. And then, after you get the pasta to the correct thickness, you bring it to another station, and there's about 4 or 5 stations in this step where you run the pasta through a cutter. So somebody runs it through and another person catches it, and then they put it on racks to dry. And it takes, I don't know, a day or 2 to dry, and then they bag it or box it to prepare for the festival. Well, there is a lot of work. It's a lot of fun, and one of the jobs I didn't mention about the festival that we did when we were kids is cleanup duty. Every morning after the festival, the previous night, the kids and some grown-ups would go out there and clean the grounds, pick up all of the trash and just make it all tidy and stuff. But we were rewarded with sodas, so we liked that. Potluck dinners. We had a lot of potluck dinners. I say a lot, probably 2 or 3 during the year, where everybody would come to the hall, and I really enjoyed those. My parents, I'm not sure if I would say, this is just something that they kind of did with their friends. They would play cards with Margie and Leroy Verucchi a lot, play cards. My traditions. At Christmas Eve Mass, now that's something that we always did, and they still do it at church, is have the youth put on a live nativity during the Christmas Eve Mass, 4 or 5 o'clock in the evening. They would do that. That was the community. The church and Tontitown, to me, are intertwined. There's really no separation for me for that. The kids I went to school with, the activities that I grew up doing in Tontitown were one and the same, connected. In the mornings going to school, I either rode the school bus or my dad would take us to school, and we would get there early. Before school started, we would walk over to church for morning mass, and it wasn't just my siblings and I. Almost the whole school, or half the school anyway, would go to mass before school started. Not that it was required, it was just part of growing up in Tontitown, and that is a memory that I have. walking over to church and seeing Elsie Mae and Gabe Penalto, who lived on South Barrington, crossing over, walking to Mass every morning. I don't think they were ever not at Mass. Growing up in Tontitown, our fun, my parents and I and siblings, we would go camping, hiking. We went to Roaring River a number of times. I can remember that. Father Zarelli went with us and Sister Maxine went with us one time. My parents would hang out with the same group of friends. They would have parties sometimes, or they would play cards with Margie and Leroy Verucchi. My parents would. We played softball. When I was in about 4th grade, a group of parents from a school and church started a softball league. It was Judy and Clarence Chola were coaches. Pat and Don Mansell were coaches, and for a number of years we would play softball all summer long. We had 3 teams. I can't remember now who the other set of coaches were, but that was a lot of fun. We had a lot of people come out there and watch. Whenever I got married in 1992, my husband and I moved to North Carolina, and we were gone, moved around a bit, but 20 years later, I guess, in 2010, we moved back to Tontitown. I came back this time with 3 kids. But the thing that I insisted, I was like, if we move back to Northwest Arkansas, I want to go to Tontitown. My husband was going to work for the university, so he was kind of thinking, well, maybe Fayetteville. But I was like, no, I really want to move to Tontitown because I loved Tontitown growing up. Let's go there. So I ended up, right here smack dab in Tontitown, go to St. Joseph's Catholic Church again. And one of the best things about moving back is seeing the people that I grew up with. The Margie and Denny Verucchi, Jetty and Roy Franco, Evelyn and Leonard Penalto. These are people that I, grew up with their kids, and I just was so happy to get to know them really as an adult now instead as a kid. Now, it has changed. There are a lot of people that aren't of Italian descent now. So it's not quite as an intimate community as it used to be, and there's a lot more traffic here in Tontitown. But the festival is still going strong, bigger than ever. It was 3 days whenever I was growing up, but now it's a 5-day festival. Tontitown is a small town. It feels small, growing bigger all of the time, but if you want to be involved, get to know people, go to the festival, be a part of the community, to get to know people, and it is just a wonderful, wonderful place, minus the traffic. I picked Tontitown because of the people in Tontitown, because of my memories of growing up. I just loved it. My favorite thing about Tontitown is the people and the church. I can't say Tontitown without talking about the Catholic Church here in Tontitown. St. Joseph's Catholic Church, that was my life growing up, and that's my life now. 2 people that I would like to talk about are Edna Lou and Pete Zuppo. because they were great friends with my grandparents, Margaret and Frank Verucchi. Growing up, I can remember Pete's old truck over at my grandparents' house all the time. My father liked to fish and to hunt, and that was his fishing and hunting buddy, Pete was. So they just have wonderful memories, and I grew up with their kids, Julie and Lance and Tommy. They were all close to my age and my siblings' age, and to this day, I love visiting with Edna Lou. She's a wonderful person, and Pete too, and it just I think makes it more special that I can be friends with them knowing how close they were to my grandparents. Well, I know they serve good food at Mama Z's. Then Edna Lou started that back in the 80s. I don't remember, 85 or 87, something like that. And now her daughter Julie runs it, owns it now, and they serve a good dinner and breakfast. I will mention this, a priest that we had, Father Greg Hart, who passed away last year. He loved Mama Z's, loved going to Mama Z's restaurant, and I can remember going there with him a few times. Just good memories. Zelinda and Mary Bestinelli lived across the field from my grandparents on my mom's side. That would be Arthur and Lillian Goodness, my Meme and Pepe. When they moved to California, from California to here in 1970, they lived in this rent house where the Tontitown Volunteer Fire Station is now. There's a house there, and across the street, across the field was Zelinda and Mary's house. So we would visit them a lot, and Meme and Pepe helped them out, you know, just with the things that they might need because they were elderly. And I can remember that old house. Well, the Bestinelli house is now the Tontitown Museum. So it's still there. The rent house is torn down, but I can remember sitting in their front room there, looking out the window at all the Grape Festival rides, trucks coming in. We would sit there and watch all of that, and it was so exciting. And then we would try to spend the night with them on Grape Festival nights, so we'd be right across from there. But they stayed in that house for just a year or so, and then moved further down on Highway 68 near our house and lived there.